Phil Chambers, what one thing does AEW do better than WWE?
Nothing.
Having watched wrestling, and mainly WWE of course, for a quarter of a century now at least, I can't believe I'm about to say this, and the fact that AEW has made me like this again, but heel authority figures. We were kind of done with them. What? 2000 and... And they just kept... No, we're going to have... no, it's not Vince anymore. We're going to have Bischoff do it, or we're going to have, the authority, or things like that. There was a general consensus within the industry of, right, when they finally decided we're just going to have Postman Pearce and subsequently the likes of Nick Aldis and William Regal and stuff within WWE. This is before AEW came along, and even when AEW did come along, Tony Khan was just sort of executive in terms of like, yeah, that's the big match. I'm not going to pick a side or anything there. You were like, okay, we're probably going to have about a decade here without authority figures, and it's more than overdue. And now, the Young Bucks have made me think, hey, heel authority figures, you all right? Because I thought they were done, if I'm honest, the Young Bucks. Not completely done. They're always going to be, have their fans within AEW, but I was kind of sick of them, and I was just indifferent towards them at that point. They're great wrestlers, of course, but this reinvigorated version of themselves, obviously pairing with Okada kind of helps because he's mint too, but just being bellends, like at time of recording, they've just on AEW Dynamite said, Renee, you're really good at your job, but you should smile more. You can't say that. They're wandering around going, we're EVPs, we get the running order of things, or we're EVPs, well, you should dress a bit smarter, or things like that. They're brilliant arseholes. This is the role that they were designed to play, and I just think they're perfect, and they've made me enjoy heel authority figures, and I think that's one of AEW's genuine best achievements in the last year.
Oh. No, I'm being facetious. It's wrestling. It's pro wrestling, and I understand that some people, at the very mere mention of that, they will think, well, yeah, that's what all of this is. I personally disagree with that, and there'll probably be another chatty face that will be able to expand upon that point. But yeah, it is pro wrestling. Right now, AEW, in the signings of Kazuchika Okada, of Will Ospreay, and potentially of Mercedes Moné when she puts the boots on, has once again, I think, owned the mantle of being the destination for the best professional wrestling in North America. That's not to say that WWE doesn't have great matches, because it does far more than it used to, not least because those matches are informed by more logical stories and by more over characters. But I think pound for pound, whether or not you judge it on Dave Meltzer's star ratings, or you absolutely disavow that ratings scale and you want to sort of find your own love about a pro wrestling match, bell to bell, I think AEW has it. I've named those three, but that discounts everybody else on that massive packed roster. There is never not an AEW wrestler you wish you were seeing wrestle more. Now, that's partly because the roster is so big and TV time is at such a premium, but I just think when you are going to be doing match of the year lists at the end of the year, it's, if you include North America, I can't pretend that my scope goes really outside of AEW and WWE as much as I know it should. But the things that tend to certainly fill those lists are more from AEW pay-per-views. AEW, in what most people consider its worst year in 2023, was still putting forth these pay-per-views that match for match could touch anything in any company's prime year. To my personal tastes, do I always necessarily find that as entertaining? No. Do I find it easier to sleep on great matches when they're not necessarily informed by hot crowds, bigger stars, bigger promos, just the bombast that like a version of a flavour of wrestling that I enjoy is there? No, I don't think matches are the be all and end all in pro wrestling, and I know that will scan as sacrilege, but AEW does and should. Matches are ultimately what keeps AEW as the alternative, and it is important to be the alternative. We are currently, as I record this, in a period of time that I can never remember before, where WWE and AEW fans are satisfied on an almost equal level for the first time, and I think a lot of that is because WWE is being the best version of itself, and AEW with a very wrestling forward mindset is doing the same. So not only do I kind of think that now, I applaud that, and I want to see the gap get wider. I'll shoot, brothers. It's not possible to love both companies equally, nor should it be.
Wow.
Do you love Coke and Pepsi equally? No, you probably prefer one. Tony Khan calls it a challenger brand for a reason, and currently the best way to challenge the brand is to put forth matches, even if they don't draw ratings, even if the houses aren't quite as big or even as hot, and in some cases they are. I think a wrestling forward philosophy is AEW's best course of action 100% of the time.
See, I do have one. It's not just nothing. Of course they've got something. What AEW do better than WWE is pure chaos. And I'm talking like mad run-ins and things at the end of matches, beat-downs, not just the sort of stadium stampedes and anarchy in the arenas of the world, although they are pure chaos and hugely entertaining as well, but like just the sort of chaotic feel and nature to the show itself, the kind of chaos that the Attitude Era kind of thrived in, where you kind of never know what's gonna happen, like things cut from the action to backstage things, like it never gives you time to breathe between matches because you're always onto something else. Just that sort of energetic, chaotic vibe to the show, I think they do way better than WWE has done in a really, 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 really long time. And it just adds that kind of excitement and like, oh god, what the hell's gonna happen next kind of thing to sort of Dynamites and everything like that. And it's just, yeah, that energy that's kind of intangible and you're like, oh god, where is this going? They nail that every single time.
So the one thing that I think AEW currently do better than WWE is believable violence. Now yes, this is a WWE roster that currently has somebody like Gunther on it and Sheamus and Drew McIntyre, people like that. So they definitely have people there that can produce some pretty physical affairs that you go, you know what, yeah, I believe every single chop, every single boot to the face, that dude's gonna beat me up, that feels real. Like that is there in WWE, but when you're thinking of certain stipulations, like you've got like a last man standing match or a steel cage match, a ladder match, these kind of things, when you just see the difference between like an AEW environment and a WWE environment. WWE just feels it still feels very polished and very performative, which wrestling is that's absolutely fine. Like you can have people just really taking their time to set up certain moments and everything does feel rehearsed at times within WWE, and that is fine. That's absolutely fine. Doesn't really take anything away from my enjoyment of WWE because I know what to expect. But when you look at AEW, it just feels frantic. There's an energy to it where you just feel like these people, everyone involved here, wants to kill each other. If you see like a Texas death match or a blood and guts match, it's ridiculous. It just feels like war. You feel like you've just stumbled in and you're in a war zone. There's blood everywhere. It's something that you're not necessarily going to get in WWE, like the blade and all that kind of stuff. If blood does happen, it tends to be hard way and accidental within WWE because that's just the way they do things over there in the land of sports entertainment. Whereas in AEW, there is that freedom to really craft genuinely quite authentic feeling fights within that landscape. So for me, if you are looking for that, if you're looking for stipulations that feel real and you can really feel the heat and the animosity and you feel like the people involved are willing to probably kill themselves to hurt the other people, I'm talking to you, Darby Allin, jumping off ladders and smashing your body through glass and bleeding down your back. If you're looking for that, AEW is the place to go right now. That is just the way it is.
I'm not being funny, I think it goes without saying that match quality, it's more emphasised. They evidently care more. I think that's apparent, so self-evident that I won't go into it. What I do think AEW succeeds at where WWE doesn't is the granular detail within storytelling. If you look at the recent introduction of Kazuchika Okada, the EVPs in January had settled into these EVP roles. At the time, and it was just thought to be a bit, they were throwing around threats of I'll fine you, I will penalise you if you upset me in any way or I deem you to be acting unprofessional, I will fine you. They, on the Dynamite before Revolution, threatened to fine Eddie Kingston. This is key. At Revolution itself, they came out in Okada-esque robes with business cards floating down from the ceiling. That was a bit of foreshadowing. Not many people got it at the time. Kazuchika Okada debuts, but before that, Eddie Kingston, and this is key, in a character trait he would absolutely have, he holds onto the seethe. You can readily imagine he spent a week seething about the idea of these pricks are trying to find me. He's held onto that anger, that is a character trait of his. So he goes out on the Revolution after Dynamite, on the Dynamite after Revolution rather, and he gets the money, and like he actually would, pays it in advance, he goes, F off, do that, and then he tries to beat them up. Okada comes out, coin drop, and you think, oh, 2 versus 2 now. There's an ally, no, there's a bait and switch, there's a swerve, and this wonderful scene, after which, by the way, they've already detonated this narrative big bang and told you you're going to get a Okada Omega 5, Bucks versus Omega on page 2, and the first really meaningful Okada versus Hangman Page match. After all of that, Eddie Kingston has been beaten up. The fines, which have been established all the way back in January, the money gets picked up, so Matthew Jackson, to use his God-given name on his passport, just gently triggers it all over Kazuchika Okada to mimic that iconic New Japan entrance. That level of detail, foreshadowing, dorky Easter eggs, I don't really get that in WWE. I think what tends to happen, and it probably works better for them, is that if they have a character, namely Drew McIntyre, just to use an example, they will tell you via exposition over and over and over again that character's trait. That's how the audience relates to that character. And what you often find is that when they do the verbal back and forth, they just volley the exposition and the premise of the traits of the character back and forth. And after some number of weeks, I'm kind of, let's get to the pay-per-view, lads. So I think AEW is better at storytelling and granular detail. I am so sorry, I will see you all.
I'm going to go with real feelings, which sounds a little odd, but I mean, it's not storyline stuff. I mean, real world stuff. Talking tribute shows, retirements. I don't think WWE really does a bad job of them, but it's a weird mixed message thing with WWE. Obviously, less so now, but under the Vince regime where you couldn't even say wrestling. They only ever really celebrated wrestling in their form, on their terms. It's their Hall of Fame, whereas AEW is a bigger, wider celebration of the sport, of the industry, whatever. So WWE stuff, good. AEW's, though, is just remarkable. Obviously, the Briscoe tribute, Brody Lee's is one of the most incredible wrestling shows. It just, how could you get through that in one piece? Is incredibly emotionally effective and just a wonderful tribute. And everything they've kind of done since with -1 and all that stuff's really nice. And more recently, slightly different, but Sting's retirement, the tour, they made a big deal of not just the end point, the final match, the retirement itself, but leading up to that, going from this is going to be Sting's last match in this place, and it felt like, just this giant celebration of a wonderful career that was almost snatched away during his time in WWE, had his sort of false retirement there, and I'm really glad that we got what we got. But AEW just does that stuff with so much feeling. So if you're a big wrestling fan, they do it right. They do it for you.
Well said.
There's something I think AEW does better than WWE, and yes, we've done the alternative video before everyone goes crazy, I suppose, is that when they're trying to tell a super serious, intense storyline, because of the way that the program Dynamite or Collision works, you can be a bit more real and a bit more edgy, not Adam Copeland, and a bit more gritty with it. Just for example, like, do I think you should swear all the time? No. Do I think you should bleed all the time? No. Keep doing this. Do I think you should do crazy over-the-top street fights all the time? No, because the law of diminishing returns, we all know this, we've talked about it. But if you do have a payoff to a, 6-month program, whatever it is, and you know that you can put them in a lights-out match and they're going to take things to the point you're like, this is kind of freaking me out, then I suppose essentially you may be able to get a better result or a better feeling in your tum-tum when you look back across the whole thing. I suppose it's not the best example, but it's why it almost worked, but didn't for reasons we'll talk about, between Kenny Omega and John Moxley. Like when they announced, we'll just do a barbed wire exploding death match. So what do you mean you're going to do a barbed wire exploding death match? I mean, it's more of a Japanese concept, I suppose, the one we regularly see here in America. But it, from a brain point of view, made me go, oh my gosh, these two really hate each other and maybe someone's going to die. Now, of course, in practice, this didn't work as intended, but go and listen to all of the players talk about this. They know it was a mistake. They know they made an error. They wanted a big firework display. And instead they got sparklets. Like, why do we fool Bruce so we can learn to pick ourselves back up again? And of course WWE will do this. Like, they do have I Quit matches and hardcore matches, and from time to time, don't know why this one popped into my head, you can get something like Randy Orton versus Mick Foley from No Way Out, or whatever it was, Backlash, I can't remember now. But at the same time, when you do sort of compare it to what AEW could potentially do, you know that they're just more willing to push the boat out. And now, of course, you can argue that's a good thing or a bad thing, because what if some of your audience doesn't like it, and what is TV executives going to think of it? I get it. It's a conversation to be had. But from a purely storyline perspective, if you can really build something up, like I say, to the point where it feels like they're going to kill each other, you can actually then just have a match where they try and kill each other, and you can just randomly do it on Dynamite, like Nick Cage versus Chris Jericho, where they were doing the whole pizza cutter thing. Now that was too much for me. It's why I'm glad that we got that Domino's advert. I think it was a Domino's advert or Pizza Hut, whoever the flub it was, right afterwards, because it made me laugh. And in that moment, I definitely needed some humour, because I don't need to see somebody's forehead get cut open like a pizza cutter. But this sort of opens it up to a brand new chat, I guess, is that wrestling should be whatever the hell you want it to be, and that could be different on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, the worst version of a Craig David song ever. But I do think that's important. I think if we just got, again, just popped into my head, the Bryan Danielson versus Shibata type match all the time, eventually you get bored of it. And if we had a Roman Reigns versus Cody Rhodes match all the time, you'd get bored of it. I think the coolest thing about wrestling is that you can tune in on any given day, as said, and you just don't know what you're going to get. That's what Forrest Gump was talking about. But yeah, they do have their more adult content, I suppose. Sometimes I want that, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I just want goofy wrestling for life, which is the main reason I went on that rant. Thank you, goodbye.
Pay-per-views, specifically the pacing and the layout of pay-per-views. I think that I know a lot of people argue about this stuff online. That's partly why I chose this as a topic, because I want to see that fire in the comment section. But for me, WWE pay-per-views are extremely poorly paced. That's not to say they're good or bad, they're just sluggish. The thing is, if you're watching them live, you get the excitement and the buzz of following it online and logging onto Twitter and seeing what people are thinking and watching it with your friends and stuff. That's excellent. But at the same time, the problem with these WWE pay-per-views is that even though they only have like 5 or 6 matches, on which I'm in favor of, they have like 30-minute gaps between them. And it's like, if you're into that kind of thing, I'm not going to argue with you, that's great. But for me, I don't want to see 15 minutes of adverts. And the problem is, it's all for Peacock and stuff, right? So that they can feed their adverts and their partners in. And we get slightly different adverts to the US viewers. They get commercials and stuff. We get like old WWE video packages. So it's like, what is gonna happen when Bobby Lashley finds out about Lana and Rusev? And it's like, my God, that's 4 years old. Why is this? He'll play you like a Braun Strowman vignette, and he's not been on TV for a year. The poor injured man. I hope he's back soon. Yeah, the pacing of the WWE shows just really gets to me. If it was bang, 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 match, brief video package, entrances, but it's never that. The video packages are always 5 to 10 minutes. I've already watched the TV. I don't need to be reminded of what happened. The entrances are super long. They're big. They're sluggish. I don't find them a pleasurable viewing experience unless it's the next day and I can fast forward through that crap. AEW pay-per-views, on the other hand, have more matches. They might be a little bit longer in runtime, but it's all action. It's just go, go, go. Even when Tony Khan goes insane and adds 15 matches to a show, I know that he's gonna zip through everything. And to me, that's good. That's what I want. I don't need the 15 minutes of sitting around between matches to get to the next one. I don't want that. I don't enjoy that particularly. I've watched the weekly shows to get to this point, so I don't need a video package. Long in-ring entrances, ring entrances, easy for me to say, are all good and well, but again, I do not need that as long as they're cool and memorable. They don't need to be long. Focus on the action, focus on moving from one thing to another, line your card up in a way that makes sense and in a way that flows. I think AEW does that extremely well, and I know you all disagree with me.
One of the things that AEW does better than WWE is its use of legends. Now, given that we're still relatively early into the WWE stewardship of Paul Levesque, this is something that could well change over the next few years, but for the longest time, WWE has historically been pretty darn awful of how it would use or not use names of the past. In AEW, though, they've realised the importance of honouring legends in a way that fit into their careers and for the roads they paved, the paths they've carved. Of course, Sting is the obvious name that jumps out, with the Stinger positioned as a top guy, a special attraction, and someone allowed to retire on his own terms, helping to erase the memories of that WrestleMania loss to Triple H and the unfortunate neck injury that suffered against Seth Rollins, which temporarily ended Sting's career. Away from Sting, though, the wrestling world is forever a better place when Jim Ross is in it. For WWE, though, they'd long seen zero value in JR as an on-screen presence, while clearly Jim still had and has plenty to bring to the table. You've got Ricky Steamboat, Diamond Dallas Page, Bret Hart, the Rock and Roll Express, Dennis Condrey, William Regal, even Baron von Raschke. While they obviously all weren't used in the same way as Sting, all still felt like big deals when they were used by AEW. Plus, you've got veterans like Bryan Danielson and Christian Cage, who've been allowed to do some of their very, very best work of their careers. Hey, even Jeff Jarrett, although it's still very much wait and see with Adam Copeland at this point as of this recording, but you've got Billy Gunn and Dustin Rhodes as another two who've had a nice resurgence. AEW has also been keen, and some would say maybe too keen, given that it takes TV time away from the company's own bloated roster, but it's been keen to honor international legends such as Satoshi Kojima, Yuji Nagata, Jun Akiyama, and murder grandpa himself, Minoru Suzuki, or just a general respect given by AEW to a New Japan or a AAA, or even honoring Owen Hart with the Owen Cup tournaments. Sure, more could have been done with Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard, Jake Roberts, Mark Henry, but there's far more hits than misses for AEW when it comes to their legends. Even in the case of the Hardy Boys, who are these days both unfortunately broken down, AEW have done their best to keep Matt and Jeff as featured TV stars as and when they've been available. Maybe even too much, with AEW possibly overestimating what the Hardys are these days capable of in ring. And while yes, his presence on TV currently feels like a tired one for various reasons, AEW still saw enough value in the veteran Chris Jericho to make him their inaugural world champion, and so often the focal point of their early programming, realizing the name value and overall package that Jericho still brought to the table back then. The Ric Flair one, yeah, Ric Flair is a notable exception to the rest, with nobody needing to see Ric Flair on weekly TV in 2024, again, for various reasons. But all in all, AEW has done a far better job in how it's used its legends, the legends of the business, than WWE historically has.